Welcome to the webinar on financial impact of bring your own devices, or popularly known as BYOD. Before we begin, few housekeeping items. I request everybody to familiarize with the GoToWebinar control panel. We will use this for polls, and also you could use the chat box if you have difficulties and for sending out questions to us. So make sure you give us your comments as the webinar progresses, and we'll do the Q&A towards the end. So let's get started. My name is Indus Khetan, and I'm one of the founders of Bitzer Mobile, who are the sponsors for this webinar today. Today's agenda for the webinar is as follows. The financials of BYOD for around 25-30 minutes. We'll also have two polls interspersed webinar and break for questions at the 30th minute mark and close roughly between 40 to 45 minutes. With that, let me welcome today's speaker, Cesare Garlati.
Good morning, Indus. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Cesare. So Cesare is a thought leader in enterprise mobility space. He's currently the co-chair of Mobile Working Group, Cloud Security Alliance. He was a former VP at Trend Micro. Earlier, he led the development of Oracle's first cloud application and has held senior positions at enterprise security software companies. Cesare, welcome and happy to have you here, and please take the discussion forward.
Thank you, Indus, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. We're going to spend the next hour on one of the most disruptive IT trends. In fact, according to Gartner, consumerization of IT is the most disruptive trend for the next 10 years. BYOD is definitely the mobile incarnation of this much broader trend. Indus, I think we can move to the next slide. Very well. And I invite you to start this conversation by looking at a broader image around the BYOD trend and what consumerization really means for us, for global organizations. And I think it really means two key things. One is that technology that is getting into the enterprise these days, more and more, not just mobile devices, but applications as well, is provided by vendors that are not traditional enterprise vendors. Google with Android, Apple with iOS, and all the devices. Amazon consumer brands, but they don't necessarily put enterprise requirements as a key designing factor for their products. And we do know, as enterprise buyers, that security and manageability are actually key for the success of our internal deployment. The second aspect that I would invite you to think about is that regardless from the vendor, consumer focus or not, technology is brought in by the employees, by the line of business owners when they open up to cloud. So corporate IT is definitely losing control, and the traditional IT operations model is not really going to cut in this new world where you have these two concomitant factors. Devices and applications that we as IT managers don't own. And by the way, even if we own them because we procure them in a centralized fashion and deploy them through a traditional deployment process, still the technology and the vendors behind this are not the traditional ones, and there are some gaps that we need to be aware and we need to fill. So let's move to the next slide and look a little bit at the first data point. Throughout the next 30 minutes, I'm going to share a lot of data with you, and then I'll be more than happy in the second part of the webinar eventually to address your questions and go in the details of each one of these data points. This is a survey that Trend Micro ran a few months ago that gives a global picture of consumerization and BYOD in particular. So if you look at the left upper corner of this quadrant, I try to recap just 4 key points. So the first one is the basic question. So do you open up, do you allow BYOD in your organization? And the definition, the way the question is being formulated is very simple. If you let employees use their own personal devices to check email, which is traditionally the entry point to any BYOD program, well, you belong to this group. And you can see from the data, 76%, or if you want, the large majority of the companies we surveyed, which, by the way, in this specific sample is more than 1,000 across Asia, Europe, and North America, say yes. So first point for you is BYOD is real. It's here to stay. And by the way, the very latest numbers that I do have, although have not been officially released yet, show that this 76% is actually up to 82% now. Now, if you move to the right side of this picture and you look at the corner there, you'll see that there are some regional differences. So the phenomenon is real, but there are some different dynamics in terms of adopting this new IT model. As traditionally happens in technology, North America is leading this, and you see the 82%, while Europe is somewhere in between, and Asia, Japan is not shown in this picture, but I can tell you, is in fact lagging the trend. When we look at company size at the bottom of the chart, you will see that conferences. So this is one of those IT trends that really span across the board and affect all regions and all company sizes. Now, I took the time actually to analyze a little bit in the details in industry verticals, and this is the fourth quadrant in the slide. Depending the industry your organization is, there might be some differences, but as you can see, the phenomenon is definitely permeating all industry verticals. I just put here the top 5 out of the 20-something industry verticals that ISO recognizes. I would ask a question to Indus. Indus, I couldn't put the very bottom of this list. What sector do you believe is at the very bottom? Who's more reluctant to embrace BYOD? Guess.
I would say government, obviously.
And that's the right answer. I'm not surprised, by the way, because we do know when we ask IT managers and really decision makers at all what keeps them from deploying BYOD and opening up, security is always the number one, is the top answer we get. So I'm not surprised to see the government and local administration, which of
But course, I'm also surprised that banking is at the number 2 from top.
Sorry, say it again?
I'm also surprised that banking is at number 2 at a high 92%.
Exactly. It's an interesting observation. So let me explain a little bit very quickly where that is coming from. This survey is really about consumerization and bringing consumer technology in the enterprise. It wasn't limited to mobile devices. So in the banking, what really makes a big difference is VDI, or virtual desktop infrastructure. Many financial organizations have opened up for specific roles to home working or teleworking. In this case, employees or contractors, whatever is the situation, in this case use their own devices. So banking ranks very high in this chart. It's more about these remote workers use probably desktops or laptops to get their job done remotely. Good point.
Sure. Yeah, and with that, Cesare, brings us to our first poll, and I probably want to ask the audience, does their company allow employees to use personal laptops, smartphones, and tablets? So I'm going to request the organizer to show the poll to the audience, and I request the audience to use the GoToWebinar control panel to respond to the question, and we'll show the results in 30 seconds. So essentially, you're going to find out, does your company allow employees to use personal laptops, smartphones, and tablets? So organizer, please show us the poll. You have 30 seconds to respond.
Very well. Indus, I can see the results coming up right now. So Obviously, our audience is a little bit skewed on the upper end, but we get a 91% yes, which is not far away from the 82% that I just mentioned. Our audience today is probably self-selected. People who attend this webinar definitely have a BYOD problem, or if you want, deployment in mind. And so 91% really, it's a reality check. So we are.
It's a reality that a large population still believes that BYOD is working for them in their organization.
Very well. So I would move to the next one. Very good. So now let's get a little bit into the details and the specific numbers that I would like to share with you today. Just to set the stage a little bit, the rest of this presentation analyzes the results of a survey that was commissioned by Trend Micro just a few months ago, and it was conducted by Forrester Consulting. The survey includes 202 companies across US, UK, France, and Germany. So this is a cross-Atlantic study, and I helped designing this study, and I really wanted to look at the financial impact. So we asked to everyone in the organization who had visibility into financials. So this is not just an IT survey. It spans across, obviously, finance, but also legal, operations, and so forth. So there are three main data points that I would like to share with you. People who are interested eventually in the full survey, which has been publicly released, or just want to get more detail, feel free to follow up offline with me. You will find my references at the end of the presentation. Very well. So again, reality check. Let's see what the respondent says when we ask them if they actually deploy BYOD programs. And 60% of the companies we surveyed actually have a BYOD program for smartphones, 47% for tablets, and 36% for traditional desktops. So the way to look into these numbers is, to me, very, very clear. Smartphones have a much higher penetration globally on the installed base. Not surprised that tablets come a little bit after. And if you look at home desktops, this is definitely the kind of situation of the traditional operating system, Windows, and traditional form factors such as desktops and laptops definitely still play a major role in BYOD. So due to the consumerization of IT trend, we see that enterprise variety of BYOD programs. Let's move to the next one, please. Very well. So here is an interesting data related to the expectations. And why I wanted really to spend some time looking into this is because sometimes when I speak with people, especially in the context of the CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, where we have more than 34,000 members around the world, I hear people coming up with this kind of notion that because BYOD involves someone else, the employee, paying for their own device and probably for their own data plan and voice plan, hey, this must be a good deal for the enterprise. And in fact, this is not always the case. So I really wanted to check, first of all, what was the driver, the business driver for companies that decided to open up to BYOD in a formal way. So here are the results. There are many answers in this survey in this for this specific question, but I picked the top three. So 70% of the companies actually expect an increase in productivity, not a cost reduction. This is an important factor. Keep this in mind, because the overall financial model that you will build to justify the ROI of this IT program needs to really put at the top the increase in productivity. Now, what follows upon is 63% give people remote access, give employee remote access, meaning access to corporate relevant information anywhere at any time. And again, this is not about saving costs. So as you see, increase in end user productivity and increase in access to data are the key driving factors. And only 40% of the company actually expected a cost reduction. So the increasing worker productivity and really the flexibility of accessing corporate data and applications are leading factors driving BYOD programs.
So with that, Cesare, which brings us to the second goal. So, the idea is to find out which statements best describe their company measures the financial impact of BYOD, and this kind of segues into your second part of the discussion. So I would request the organizer to please show us the second poll. You have 30 seconds to respond, and we'll discuss the results after that. So again, use the GoToWebinar control panel to respond to the poll, and then we'll discuss the results after that. Essentially, we're going to assess, which statement describes the way your company measures the financial impact, if it does at all, and then we'll have Cesare discuss the results and his findings of how we measure the financial impact. So organizer, please make sure that the audience is able to respond and share us the results when ready.
Very well, Indus. Thank you. I see the results coming up now. So before we get into the numbers, why I thought this would be a good question to ask? Because something that came out of this Forrester study was a kind of really striking evidence that companies don't really measure the financial, or if you want, the vast majority of the companies don't really keep track of all the financial aspects of this new IT model. And so obviously you cannot optimize, you cannot improve what you don't measure. So a good starting point for moving forward your BYOD and consumerization program at large is to start looking into the financial aspect. So here is what the poll results says. 32% says measure BYOD impact separately from other business processes, which is a good number. But we have an 18%, 1/8, that says not measure separately, but more concerning, it's 50% who actually don't know. And I'm not surprised.
Not surprising, right?
Not surprising, as I said. So if you look at who is really aware of the fact that they are measuring and they are measuring separately, is just the 32%. So if you combine don't know with not measure separately, it really confirms this key point. And so we'll get to the recommendation part at the end of the call, but I think one key point, again, that you might want to start thinking about is that, hey, this is not different than any other IT deployment I've been through. It doesn't matter if it is a database, if it is a new email system, if it is a collaboration, whatever is the technology that you deploy, there must be a way to calculate an ROI, and this model definitely needs to start from measuring all the financial impacts. And so the rest of this webinar is going to help you eventually structure this framework and really spell out what are the things that you might want to look at.
Thank you.
Excellent. So this is, again, reality check. We just tested our audience and got their input. So let's look what the much broader sample surveyed by Forrester said. As you see, 53% of the company, which is approximately half, actually measures the cost and the financial impact of the mobile device itself. A little bit more, 58%, measure the impact of voice plans, and only 52 data plans. So as you can see, the number is definitely aligned. And so most enterprises really measure the impact of a wide variety of BYOD-related items, but only half of them actually measure specific BYOD separately from other business processes. And just to make it clear, what I mean is that if it is a BYOD program, let's say for mobile devices, and the company pays a stipend and reimburses some money to the employee, let's say $20, $30 per month, whatever is the situation, this cost doesn't really flow through corporate IT. So it's not budgeted to IT. So typically, employees then reimburse it. And so only finance, the finance group within the company, can really see this, what was before an IT cost or whatever is the group, the telecommunication group within the company cost, now flowing through or hidden through expense reports, still going back to the enterprise, but completely out of scope of what has been the specific deployment, which is in this case enterprise mobility. So that I like to share the key ones. Now, the study is related to the cost and benefits from a dollar perspective, right, from dollar value perspective. So the Forrester research really asked for increase in terms of percentage or decrease in terms of percentage. It wasn't an answer in terms of dollar value. And respondents actually indicated bands, so 30% to 50% and so forth. So the numbers are very interesting, but probably not much actionable. So what I did on top of that was to run my own data analysis and figure out a weighted average so that we would get a reasonable estimate supported by all of these samples of what we should expect in our own organization. So let's start with the costs. And again, I couldn't put all the 30 different costs that we analyzed, so I just picked the top 3. Help desk calls, the volume of help desk calls, and the cost related to these calls is going to increase on average of 8%. So this is probably one of the major findings, and I don't know how many people would expect this. As we know, help desk is definitely one of the major costs, usually among the top 3 costs of any IT organization. So to increase almost 10%, 8% this cost is a big increase. People who are interested eventually have the details, and you can see if this reflects an increase in headcount, meaning hiring more people for help desk, or if this increase just in a cost if you outsource this. But the key point behind this is that help desk calls rise significantly because the IT, the traditional IT operation model, it's broken with BYOD. Think about this. Corporates, IT corporate groups always have this single standard approach to anything. Database, email server, endpoints, desktops, laptops, smartphones. Our single standard for mobile devices might be BlackBerry. That's what corporate would email. They know exactly what model of that BlackBerry user is using, what version of the software, on what network it's connecting, and so forth. Now, fast forward, 2013, you open up to BYOD. That end user, that employee, still is trying to get email, corporate email, calls in the help desk, but your help desk personnel has no clue, no idea what device they're using, what operating system, what version, with what application, what email, and by the way, across what network is this through Wi-Fi, is this 3G, whatever. Now, try still to help this employee becoming productive is the responsibility of IT. But in this case, it becomes much, much more difficult because your IT people simply are not aware of all the possible configuration combinations. A little bit faster. The second cost or hidden cost that showed up is mobile security. Now, I think this is important to understand because mobile security is not just mobile device management. There are many other costs that are related not just to the service in itself or the software itself, but actually managing it. Let's not forget that you can buy whatever software you want, whatever service you want, but someone has to take care of this. And that's an important part of the cost. So expect, on average, 7% increase in the cost of software and just man-hours to get security set for, again, technology that you, as an IT buyer, IT professional, don't own. And the third one that came up with an increase of 3% is server costs. This is probably easy to understand, right? So if you open up to BYOD, you are really extending your base a lot. Because at that point, basically, any employee, not just white collars, not just people who work with data, have access to the email. And at that point, really, you multiply by 2, by 3, then the volume of traffic is directed to your servers. So let's get into the financial benefits now. I hope this helps structure a little bit of a framework eventually, and also a case for people who are interested in moving forward their programs and presenting this to management or eventually to their finance department. Now, this slide is in green, and the reason why I picked this color is because that increase in productivity alone, that 12% on average, and this is absolutely conservative estimate, more than happy to share the underlying raw data with anyone who is interested. Really is a dramatic increase in productivity. Think about how much spending we did in IT for how many different disparate systems and never got anything this close, right? So this number in itself seems to me a little bit too good to be true. So I just wanted to run my back on the envelope about your employees and their 8 hours of work traditionally. Now look at BYOD, what really enables. Enables people to, for instance, check email or start looking into some documents for the day, whatever is the situation, 30 minutes before they leave home. And in those, think of you, I think of me, people in the audience, think about it. Probably a few years back when you didn't get those, if you didn't get these corporate mobile devices, if you weren't allowed to get one of those BlackBerries, you probably would just get to the office and open up the laptop or the desktop and start looking at email. Today, you probably do this well, maybe when you're home drinking your cup of coffee, maybe when you are commuting on the train, on the bus, whatever is the situation. Hopefully,
well, if I only could take my mainframe home, that would have been better.
Yeah, but I think what happens in the evening, right? So in the evening, you had 30 more probably minutes when you're watching TV, and you are multitasking, and so you have your TV set going on there, something else going on the other side, you have your tablet open, and that email comes in. So I don't think you want to bring a mainframe home also for evening entertainment, but I think this is the reality check. If you add those 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the afternoon, in the evening, sorry, you get 1 hour. 1 hour out of 8 is exactly 12.5%. So numbers actually add up. And again, quickly, the other two major benefits that you should expect on average is a dramatic reduction in cost of device replacement. And this is a lot to do with the fact that people really love their own personal devices. And there is plenty of evidence, a lot of analysis that shows that if you own something rather than being given this something from the corporate, you will keep much better care of it. So you are less likely to drop it, to forget it, to whatever is the situation. Also, let's not forget, if you use personal device and you get a stipend, you probably don't get any special reimbursement if you upgrade the device. And that was actually one of the reasons why people would lose all of those BlackBerries just 3 weeks after the new model was released, right? So you see, worker productivity, big number. But all data cost. So it seems like, and again, data available, if people are given a fixed amount of revenue, they are in control of the data plane, they are more careful in the way they use the data plane. And international roaming is not just the only situation. Watching videos consumes a lot of bandwidth. Truly unlimited data plans don't really exist. There's always a cap. So as long as the company pays for it, and this, by the way, was designed very well by carriers who have actually cost plans, the cost is somehow hidden to the end users. And so now, if you allow BYOD, they feel responsible, and even if you in the end reimburse them for that cost, you are likely to see a reduction in those costs. Very well, so let's move to the final slide. Very well, I see just a piece of it. There should be a left part of the slide.
That's coming up in the next section.
Okay, very well. So this is intended to be a recap slide to really open up to the conversation for the next 30 minutes. So takeaway points. So number one, consumer technology is happening, is invading the enterprise, and you won't be able to resist it. And by the way, data shows that it actually makes good business sense. So you definitely shouldn't try to resist it. Second point, BYOD brings real benefits, but brings in also some hidden costs for the IT organization. And this is key to understand. If you put together your plan, your business case, let's not forget, if you are in IT, what IT is going to see is an increase in cost. So you need to factor in and figure out a way to pull back that increase in productivity that you won't see necessarily in IT, but it will be so widespread and so relevant to the rest of the organization to really close the loop. And the third point is that I invite you to think about this, is the lack of a strategic approach to consumerization and BYOD that creates security risks, financial exposure, and really a management nightmare for you. So take a strategic approach. What does it mean? So here are very quickly my 3 recommendations, and happy to go into the details in the next 30 minutes or so. So number 1, embrace consumerization to unlock its business potential. What does it mean? We take a webinar in itself, but basically in a few words, make sure you have a plan. Be proactive. Don't wait after the fact. Don't wait until that line of business, that business unit has bought 15,000 iPads and deployed internally to figure out that you need to secure them. That's after the fact. That's not strategic. Now, second recommendation, build a framework to measure the ROI of your BYOD program, which means keep track of all of your IT costs, but also keep track of those core costs that additionally directly to the end users, directly to the line of business. In that way, you can really reconcile the numbers and eventually show what has been the true ROI, return on investment, on this IT program. And the third one, which I think is extremely important, is to fully realize that this is not just an Apple device instead of the BlackBerry. It's not just a different device. It's a totally different IT model. And therefore, you do need new IT tools to secure and manage this consumer technology that gets into the enterprise. These very successful consumer-focused vendors will not and do not provide that level of security and manageability that you, as an enterprise buyer, expect. There is a gap. You need to fill that gap. Good. Very well. Just a quick note to remind everyone that you will find a lot of additional resources, including the links to all of the documents that I mentioned, on my own personal blog, which is bringyourownit.com. And if you tweet me at Cesare Garlati, and that's one word. Thank you all for your attention. And Indu, I guess you will open up to questions now.
Right. So thank you, Cesare. There was a fantastic insight into the financial impact of BYOD. We'll wrap it up in a minute, but in a few minutes rather. Let's quickly take some questions. I have some questions queued into the chat box. I'm just reading out one. It says, from the employee perspective, how do you address the trust issue of separating personal and business usage? Cesare, you want to take this?
Oh, yeah. I'm really glad that this question came up. This is really key. And it is very related also to the financial impact of BYOD. Let me explain you what I mean. So traditionally, the first line of defense, the first attempt to manage BYOD devices within the organization has been to rely on active sync policies. Active sync is a component, is the communication protocol basically embedded into the Exchange email server, but it also provides policies. It's free, basically. It's already there. It's embedded in every mobile platform, Android and iOS and Windows. So seems like a good idea. Well, companies soon realized that it's good, but it's good just for a very basic minimum set of requirements. So the next step typically companies go through is to deploy MDM, mobile device management. And here is where the problem really starts and becomes big. Because MDM is really a solution that has been designed with the traditional IT model in mind. It's an evolution really to mobile of the traditional system management software. So it assumes that the device, the asset, is owned by the corporate. And so here are a couple of bad things that can happen if you install traditional MDM software and on employee-owned devices. So one is that MDM can eventually remotely delete personal data on those devices. In fact, MDM can wipe out the whole device. Now, in that situation, who's responsible for the loss of the data? And therefore, if the employee comes back and eventually complains with the company or sues the company, well, there is room for a litigation there, and in the end, a cost to settle it. So again, this is a policy aspect that turns out to be actually a financial impact. So another couple of examples regard invasion of privacy. This system actually allows to see traffic and really applications and content on these target devices, which is not appropriate or even illegal in some region of the world. I'm thinking about Europe. And the third one is the case of e-discovery, when the company gets into a litigation with a third party and requires the court, really the judge, requires to seize all the devices connected to that specific litigation. And these devices includes also personally owned devices if you have a formal BYOD program in place. So how you deal with this situation? Well, first of all, the conversation will be much longer, but just to give a sense, don't try to manage the device. Focus on what is really the corporate asset, which is the data. And there are ways to do this through application wrapping, through other fashions of containers. Virtualization also is a very interesting approach. Let's not forget that some of the mobile devices are in fact laptops. And so with traditional operating systems, Windows, and much larger screen, a laptop screen, VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, is still definitely a viable solution. So just quickly, don't try to manage too much if you don't own that device, because you're just opening.
Now that we have actually a lot of questions coming in, Cesare, let's just quickly run as many as possible. There's another one on MDM. The question is rather long, but the question essentially, I'm trying to summarize. How do I measure the success of my recently launched MDM program? We do not have any metric in place.
That's another excellent question. So I think the way to measure that is really to look at what benefit from a business perspective you achieved. Now, only driver was to try to secure the company, and you really don't have a baseline of incidents that happened before, that might become kind of difficult. Now, if on the other hand, if instead of looking for core security, your driver was really to improve, to streamline operational efficiency, well, that might actually be easier to measure. For instance, one way to look at this would be by looking at the volume, again, of help desk calls or tickets. Without an MDM solution, just setting up the Exchange server on the client side or a VPN configuration might be a little bit tricky. Let's not forget, this is for the old internal base. So by looking at what was the volume of this kind of calls, again, related to personally owned devices before, and looking at the same number after deployment of the MDM, this might actually offer a basic metric to justify this investment. But again, and this is the whole point of the webinar today, don't just look within the IT organization, because again, maybe by deploying an MDM solution, what you were really able to do was to empower, to extend, to open up your corporate information and data to a much broader internal base. And this translates in pure employee productivity increase. And so again, that's the whole point of the presentation. Make sure you reach out into the other organizations and see what are the worker productivity benefits because of this new deployment.
Good. There's another very interesting one I'm just reading. The question is, we also find that the hidden cost exists when customers don't manage the voice and international roaming plans or texting plan. Do you have any data on the usage plan cost with BYOD, and does it increase or decrease? So essentially, summarizing the question, Cesare, in case of a BYOD, we do not have access to the data plans or the text plans. Does the cost increase or decrease when there's a BYOD?
Yes, so the answer is yes. I do have the data. It's part of this comprehensive survey. It would be a little bit too much to really go into the details right now. I invite whoever asked this question to follow up offline. More than happy to share all the details. But just let me reiterate this point. Voice and data actually costs go down compared to a traditional deployment, let's say a BlackBerry one. And again, the reason is that you really put the responsibility, picking the provider, picking the plan, and actually staying within that cap that the plan involves to the end user. And the way you make them responsible is by providing a stipend, a fixed amount of reimbursement. Therefore, if they exceed that capacity, if they go above that, they are ultimately liable. And this is an incredible, important, effective way to really responsibilize people. By the way, let's think quickly about just a few years back. I'm pretty sure many of the people in this call, including myself, had one of those corporate-provided, corporate-owned, corporate-liable BlackBerries. Well, I had no idea, no clue what the company would pay for data, if I could do international roaming, if I could do texting. I had simply no idea because I couldn't care less. The company gives me that tool, I use it, hey, it's for my work. Now, I remember specific cases where I would have access to free Wi-Fi from that device. But I would still use 3G, and by the way, I would use 3G at an international roaming rate simply because there was no really benefit for me as an end user. In the end, it's the company that pays for that. Now, if you look at 2013 and what happens now that I have my own iPhone, oh my goodness, it makes a lot of difference. And of course, I first go to Wi-Fi. I try to find a free one if I cannot find a paid one. And the very last resort is to use that international data roaming bucket of 20 megabytes or whatever it is.
Sure. There are 2 or 3 questions around tools for BYOD productivity. So I'm going to summarize what are the tools available to measure BYOD productivity, and just adding on to the second part, event productivity on work-provided machines. So let's just keep it short, Cesare. We have a few more if we can cover.
Right. I'm not sure I fully understand the second part of this question, what it means in a BYOD context, productivity related to corporate-owned device.
Yeah, what are the tools available to measure productivity in general, whether it's BYOD or corporate-owned?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. So there is plenty of tools, but the way these are not the tools that actually allow to secure BYOD. Okay, it's a totally different conversation. Anyone who's interested in doing anything serious in this realm, I would invite to contact one of the traditional consulting firms. They have frameworks, they have people, they have a whole practice basically that is intended to really measure any kind of metrics within IT. If your organization is small and doesn't really can afford an Accenture or Deloitte kind of project, there is plenty of documentation available, for instance, at the CSA, Cloud Security Alliance. We have many working groups. We publish a lot of guidance documents. Most of these, not just about mobile, and most of these documents actually involve ways to benchmark, basically. Whatever is the volume of work that is achieved throughout any kind of IT service. Again, the answer would be too long, really, to take it now. I'm not sure about the second part, really, but I think measuring the productivity of any IT service, IT solution, IT application, it's something very well understood, has been understood for a long time, and really involves looking at specific key metrics within your IT system. Number of emails, number of attachments, volume of communication. If you have collaboration, how much people collaborate on these systems. If you have a secure file sharing service, how many files are actually open through this secure file sharing system rather than traditional share. It will be a really long conversation.
Okay. Good. So I think we have time for just one more question. Let me just scroll through quickly and read out. Are the cost savings of a BYOD program justified? So let's just keep it in 1 minute, Cesare, and we'll wrap it up.
Well, if I have to keep it in 1 minute, I would say, hey, let's not forget that many people believe that BYOD is happening simply because you cannot stop it. and that in itself would say the whole story. And now, I think that the data that we show throughout this presentation, and I have many other samples if people are interested, really points out one key answer to that question, which is if you just look into IT, BYOD does not justify this cost. But that's the wrong way to look at that. You have to look at the whole business, because the major benefit that you will achieve is worker productivity, not IT worker productivity. And therefore, that productivity needs to be taken into account and matched to that eventually increasing volume and costs within IT.
Great, fantastic. That was the last question. Let's just wrap up. Cesare, it was a pleasure having you, and great set of insights. In fact, the 3 things I remember crisply: that embrace BYOD, deploy the program, and definitely measure the success of the program. I would take that home. I thank the audience for joining us. This presentation would be available for download on our website. We will also be emailing you this presentation. Of course, after the webinar ends, please use the survey to provide feedback on topics and content which you are interested in. And we will also make this webinar available to you on demand on our website. We also have resources on our website, such as Cesare's blog. You could go to our website, download some white papers, and definitely do not miss out on our next webinar, which is SharePoint and Mobile, which is happening on August 6, 2013. Again, Cesare, it was a great pleasure having you today for the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Yunus, for adding, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you. Signing off. Bye now, and have a great evening and a great day.